So, starting midnight, the price of fuel has gone up. Okay, and this as happens every 14th of every month, in accordance with the law. The Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority releases the new prices that are going to run for the next 1 month, and basically they just do what they're supposed to do. In this particular explanation, they say they take into account the weighted average cost of imported refined petroleum products, the changes in the maximum allowed petroleum pump prices in Nairobi are going therefore to be up by 8 shillings and 19 cents for super petrol, 5 shillings and 51 cents per litre for diesel, and 5 shillings and 32 cents per litre for kerosene. So a number of explanations here. Oh, how much we acquired the oil from, how much it cost us, the landed cost of this product. And then now we start factoring in. There's various taxes here and there. There's 8% VAT. There's I don't know what. And this, all that brings the price of the product to whatever you're going to be paying now for the next 1 month, which is going to be 8 bob more expensive for super petrol. Okay? Now, CT, many times when we talk about this and we say every month this will change, there are times when the price is actually reduced. There are times when the price goes up. And they explain and say this is going by how much the landed cost of product was in that particular month, in the preceding month, which is the product is going to be consumed in the country for a month. And this is all done through oil companies coming together, participating in what is called now the open tender system. And in the open tender system, you come in and you place your bid. You say, I'd like to supply the amount of product that's required to run for a month. And the one with the lowest bid wins. And they're the ones that bring. Now, your issue here usually is you don't feel the drop. You always feel the rise.
Well, I read about the drop. I read about it. They even tell you in advance what it might drop by. But the increase is something that, in my mind, maybe it's a figment of my imagination, but that it's the constant reality. That our oil prices, even when COVID was at its peak, and we are told that oil prices fell to an all-time low. Again, this story of landed cost was prominent. You see, at the time when we bought this oil, this was the price. So COVID notwithstanding, 1 year later, so I asked myself, so when we purchase oil, we buy this thing in bulk for a whole year. And when at the time we bought it, it was all very expensive. So despite this drop, everything is still going to remain high simply because, as we are told, at the time when we bought it, this was the price. I find it confusing up to this point. Even you say people get together, the lowest bid, what I hear and what I feel, cartel. These people conspire together and said, no, you get it this time. Maybe it's a conspiratorial mind, but no, you get it this time. How? Because if indeed these reductions were real, why is it then, for instance, the simple cost of producing fuel? Because a great deal of our fuel is generated by using generators, and generators use fuel. Something as simple as that.
Fuel is generated by using
our
generators.
electricity
okay.
is generated by fuel. Something as simple as that, I would feel it directly, because if the price of fuel goes down, then I would argue, the price of the price of electricity has also gone down. Confusing, because these things simply don't happen.
You're always in a state of confusion.
I am when it comes to these things. So I stop thinking about it. If they increase it, fine. If they decrease it, fine. I never worry that it has gone up or down. It's fine.
Let's bring in somebody who understands this matter clearly, right?
Yes.
Engineer Patrick Obath has worked in the oil and gas sector for very many years. Now he, sits at a position where he advises. So he's a chair of various boards, but he still gives consultation and advice to people who are investing in the oil and gas sector. But he's worked in this sector for very many years, working in the refineries, working in the oil companies, managing one of the biggest oil marketing companies in the country. And so he understands this matter very well. Good morning, Dr. Obath.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome to the Situation Room, and we're glad that you could join us.
Thank you very much.
You've heard Siti Muga and his confusion. Let's just say hello to him, just to calm him down first.
Good morning, Sweetie. How are you?
Patrick, I'm very well. How have you been?
Very fine, thank you.
You look well.
Yeah, I'm feeling very well. You know, when you're confined by corona, you sort of end up starting to keep yourself busy within the confines. So exercise becomes a great thing.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yes.
But you're
absolutely.
always one for keeping fit and staying healthy. So I think it's in keeping with what you've always done.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But now the confines are different.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
let's
Yeah.
just start from the very beginning. Price goes up.
Yeah.
Price, we are told, comes down. CT does not hear it coming down.
I don't feel it.
It just doesn't even feel it coming down. What is this
Right.
that happens every 14th? And what is the genesis of this 14th of every month prices fluctuating?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that the whole of the government decided that they were going to have a fixed way of pricing. They developed a pricing formula which is managed by the Energy and Petroleum Regulation Authority, EPRA, and within that, the elements that you spoke about earlier are all in there. So it's a landed cost of fuel, which includes the handling cost at the port, and that includes putting all the taxes that are required into the price. Then you transport it up to the nearest depot of the Kenya Pipeline Company or the oil company, and that is added into the formula, the cost of transportation, and obviously the cost of transportation by the pipeline is the cheapest compared to the cost of transportation by truck. So, for example, if you're going to Mtitwandei, you don't have a depot nearby, so you either arrive from Nairobi or from Mombasa. Preferably from Mombasa, because then you're going up in the same direction,
Right.
and you have not included that the tariff for taking it to Nairobi and then bringing it back. Yeah. So so it's built up to that depot, and then from there, you then build it up from the depot where it is loaded up to the petrol station where it is being sold. But that is averaged out within a particular area. So when you look at what is called the wholesale margin, which is the landed cost plus the bringing it up to the depot,
Yep.
there is a wholesale margin, which is a price that goes to the oil marketer, which is their margin for their handling, their investment, all their stuff that they do. Yeah.
Yep.
And then there is a transport margin, which pays the transporter. And then there's a retail margin, which pays the person at the petrol station.
Yep.
Now, the retail margin, the wholesale margin, and the transport margin, and the pipeline margin are all fixed. And they have been fixed for a long time. So the money that each of those organizations makes is almost fixed per unit, and all they're fighting for now is volume. How much volume can they get? And that way they sort of make more profit, as it were.
Okay.
So the biggest determinant on the cost of fuel is the international cost, the landed cost at Kenya, at the port of Mombasa. And this one fluctuates based on an indexed price. So it is indexed either on, ours is indexed on ADNOC, which is the Middle East. Although most people see Brent or West Texas, which is the more of the global one, but there is a Middle East index called ADNOC, and the prices that we buy at are indexed on the Middle East. And that is because most of the fuel that we buy in Kenya comes from the Middle East. So it is best to
Benchmark
index
it
it
with
from
that.
there.
Yes.
Yes. Now, one of the things that we have an advantage of in Kenya compared to other parts of the world is that there is a surplus, a big surplus of refining capacity in the Middle East. So with the refining capacity in the Middle East very much underused, the cost of fuel coming out of the Middle East is almost about 10 to 15% cheaper than if you had to refine it somewhere else in the world. So if you look at the price, the purchase price of oil, of the fuel that comes to Kenya, compared to the price of fuel that is sort of, say, bought in Rotterdam, we are at that amount cheaper, just on buying it. And then you've got to ship it. So if you have to buy it in Rotterdam and bring it here, the shipping cost will cut out that would actually make it even more.
Yeah.
So the elements that go into that landed cost is the cost at the Middle East plus the cost of shipping.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a cost of shipping as well, other than the sort of the headline cost that you see, which is the cost of oil at the port where it is bought in. So then you have this so-called open tender system that allows anybody who is a registered trader to bid within the open tender system. Now, when they bid, they've got to factor in where they're getting the oil from, and sometimes there is a cheap cargo that is coming from Singapore.
Yeah.
That you can get, and then you pay, and then you work out how much it's going to cost you to bring it to Mombasa from Singapore, compared to somebody who's probably buying it from the Middle East, or somebody who's got a stranded cargo in the high seas, and they want to get rid of it because somebody was going to buy it and then they decided they're not going to buy it, and you're sitting with this expensive ship in the ocean.
Yeah.
Then you decide to buy it and bring it to Kenya. So there's a whole host of factors that go into the actual price, the landed price that brings it in. Now starts the complicated bit. When you bring it in, you have, at any given time when they're calculating the price of fuel in Kenya, they calculate it on the average cost of the fuel that is present in the country. Some of it may be old stock, some of it may be new stock that has just come in, or may have come in 2 or 3 weeks earlier. So those play in. So you may have a cargo that arrived just 2 days before, and that may be at a higher price than whatever it is that was in the system, so that bumps it up. Whereas if it goes lower, if the price is lower, then the price in the system is higher, so it bumps up the price of what came in. So that average price is what you get. So the fluctuations in Kenya are not that big, based on the international costs of fuel. So what you see happening at the end of the day when the EPRA normally puts their price, they look at all those, average everything out, and then they say this is the price of fuel. So when you look at the price, the absolute price of fuel in Kenya, if you convert it into US cents per liter, you find that Kenya is amongst one of the cheapest countries in Africa, in fact. The cost of fuel in Kenya is cheaper than in Nigeria, which produces oil. The cost of fuel in Kenya is cheaper than in South Africa. It is cheaper than in a country like Morocco, but it's also cheaper than in Tanzania. So you find that we talk about the price of oil in Kenya, or fuel in Kenya, being high, but that is purely because we see it in absolute terms just within Kenya. But on average, if you look across the African continent, we are, again, we talk about our cost being about 10 to 50% cheaper than in Europe and the US in terms of the source of the material. But once you've added all that, the actual cost in Kenya is almost another 5 to 7, maybe even 10%, depending on the country, cheaper than other countries in Africa, most of the other countries in Africa.
Okay, Patrick, taking all that you've said into consideration, and you said the determining factor is the landed cost of fuel, of oil, right? So if we're looking at oil prices and what happened last year with COVID and all of this, when there was very little buying per se that happened, and the prices were quite low on the international market for oil. Would we have seen a direct impact then on what happened with the cost? Because still here, every 14th, regardless of COVID or not, we saw the price fluctuations in the country. Should they not have then impacted quite significantly on what was available?
There's another factor. Now, let's just look at the total buildup of price in Kenya. Out of every sort of, say, 108 shillings that you pay, for super, for premium fuel, approximately 40 to 45% of that, I think it just increased to 50%, is taxes in the government. So those are fixed costs.
Half of it is tax.
So if you look at all that, and then you look at all the various fixed costs, the margin, everything else that you have in here, the price of fuel at the beginning is actually quite low. So it has a very minimal impact on the overall formula.
Okay.
So our internal costs are very much the heavier bit, and that is what it muffles out the big fluctuation that you see internationally.
So even if you did have a low global cost of oil, for example, that would not have an impact on the prices that you see then in the country.
Let me give you a scenario. Yeah. If the price of crude oil, which is what we normally index it on, if the price of crude oil, say, went from the current sort of $60, $65, $70 per barrel, and then dropped to say $50 a barrel and stayed there for 6-7 months, so that everything else evens out and all your costs even out, the price of fuel in Kenya would drop from say 105 shillings down to about 90. Yeah, so it's about a 15 shillings to 20 shilling drop.
Okay,
that's the maximum you'll get. So that is if you look at the average the average cost of fuel, it fluctuates within that range.
And the main determinant here is the tax bit.
It's a fixed cost that we have within Kenya, which is the transportation cost, the margin of the oil company with the wholesale margin, plus all the losses, pipeline losses, etc., which are in the first sector, and which are all fixed, by the way. And then the cost of the operating the depot, the transportation cost, and then the retail margin. So all that is fixed.
You know, it's truly amazing when you say fixed costs, because they're only fixed insofar as those costs aren't going away. But in terms of the value of the cost itself, it's strange. If you talk about oil fluctuations, if the price of oil goes up, so does the transportation. I mean, I apologize if my mind seems like it's negative, but it's this vicious cycle where the end consumer is always paying more and more and more and more and more and more. Yes, in fact, those who trade in oil know this person is fixed.
Yes,
he's going to continue consuming our product. But let me ask what I wanted to ask. So, what is the advantage of having a refinery in your country?
A refinery in the country is only an advantage if it is of the kind of scale that you benefit from the economies of scale. So let's take, for example, when you had a refinery in Kenya. The price, the capacity of the refinery was about 100,000 barrels a day, say. Yeah?
Yes.
And forget about the word barrels. It's just a comparative figure. The smallest size of refinery in the Middle East is 250,000 barrels. And the current minimum size being invested in is 400,000 barrels plus.
Wow.
Okay.
So you look at the one that Dangote is building in Nigeria, it is 450, it's about 500,000 barrels a day. Now, if you have a refinery like we had in Kenya, you would only be making fuel elements. That's it. Whereas in the Middle East, fuel is not the main thing. Fuel is actually a byproduct.
Byproduct of oil,
They are what are called fully complex refineries, which are petrochemical complexes. And the money they make is actually made out of raw materials for textiles, for pharmaceuticals, for fertilizers, and so forth. So that's what comes out of the end of those factories, of those refineries. So for them to produce fuel, it's a byproduct, it's very cheap. So you will only benefit with having a refinery in your country at this present day only if you've got a fully complex refinery where you generate the margins from the value add material, and then you can effectively, the cost of fuel and stuff like that is almost a giveaway. And that is why when the refinery used to operate in Kenya, it was more expensive to refine in Kenya if you said the cost of refining and then you sell it at the refinery gate with duty paid, and you compare that with prices of oil imported, finished from the Middle East, and taxes paid, it was more expensive to produce in the refinery in Kenya.
My goodness. So we're having a conversation about pain at the pump as petrol prices go up. This is the headlines across all the dailies this morning. Petrol prices are going up by 8 shillings. Trying to understand, so what are these determinants that the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority uses to adjust the price of petrol for a month? And that's what Engineer Patrick Obath is teaching us this morning. He is an oil and gas expert. He's worked in this industry for very many years now. He sits back and advises and teaches people like us who don't understand a thing about we just know bei imepanda hii serikali